Well, I'm Amy, and I was diagnosed in 2017. I was in my late 40s at the time, but what led me to my diagnosis prior to, I would say easily 7 years prior to my diagnosis, I started experiencing significant anxiety. Um, I am a person who's prone to be a worrier, but this was different level anxiety that was impacting my life. And I was in my late 30s at the time, and being a female, you go to your doctor and they say, oh, it's probably hormone related. You're a young, busy, full time working mother. I'm a speech language pathologist working full time. So I do have knowledge of different neurological etiologies. Parkinson's was not on the radar, although my my paternal grandmother had Parkinson's. I wasn't experiencing anything motor. Um, Fatigue became an issue, and I'm a very high energy person. So that was very frustrating. But again, full time working mom, two boys, they're early teens at the time when I was diagnosed. So, what led me to the doctor, my primary care doctor, I actually had two things going on at once. I had some pins and needles going down my left arm that would happen kind of randomly. But then I also was developing tremors in my right hand and my pinkies, fingers at rest at work. I noticed it when I was holding the mouse. And it was enough to kind of give me pause, like, oh, what is happening with my fingers here? So I did go to my primary care doctor, and thence all the testing began, trying to figure out what the deal was with the pins and needles in my left arm. Um, I was actually, when that first happened, I was in a teacher get to know the teacher meeting with my for my son, and it was a long day after work, and I thought, oh my gosh, am I having a heart attack right here in the meeting because you hear left arm symptoms? Um, Obviously, I wasn't. Fast forward to going to the primary care doctor. She said, all of this does sound very neurological. Let's get you to a neurologist. I've always exercised all my life. I exercised before work, after work. I was a runner, so I thought perhaps I'd injured, something running. Um, when I went to the neurologist, they started their gamut of tests. They first did a CAT scan of my head. They did then an MRI of my brain. Um, they started to just rule out as many things as they could. As we know, medicine is as much ruling out as it is ruling in. So they were ruling out MS. They were ruling out I had the test where they put the needles in you and then they give you a little shot to see how your nerves were responding. So they were ruling out ALS, ruling out brain tumor, ruling out stroke, just a lot of ruling out. And this was over the course of, gosh, it took 2 years to get to my diagnosis. And I believe that started probably, my symptoms probably started, the physical symptoms, about 2015. And, you kind of watch it for a while and then you see that it's not going away. So um, 2016 is when we started with kind of the hardcore empirical test and instrumental, where they imaging, and they discovered I had severe degenerative disc disease. So I had a surgery, a ACDF surgery. I point to my neck because that's where they did the surgery. And that was the reason for the tingling in my left arm. And the minute I woke up from surgery, I looked at my my right hand, and it was still tremoring. And the neurosurgeon said that is something beyond your cervical disease. We need to see your neurologist, continue with your neurologist for that. So back I went to my neurologist, and it ended up being within the next 9 months later, I guess. So in 2017, they determined that I had young onset Parkinson's. Um, it was just kind of a weird lightning strike kind of thing that I had the cervical stenosis that reared its symptoms a little bit prior to the Parkinson's. But to be clear, they're two separate neurological things that happened to me at once. Um, and with the surgery that I did have for the cervical, we knew that with the tremors still going on, that it was something more. I had also experienced some balance issues, and my right arm was not swinging as I was walking. And I had fallen a couple times when I was running because we realized my right leg was not um, perfectly clearing the ground. So my neurologist then said, we're going to send you to the motor movement disorder specialist at that practice because um, we want to make sure that, what is going on. And after one visit with him, he said, yes, this is Parkinson's. So that's how I got to that step. It was kind of circuitous, but being a woman, they first look at the hormone stuff and then factor in the physical issues. Honestly, I was very frightened because the first neurologist said, you have Parkinsonism. And that was a term that I had not heard, I had not identified with. And of course, being the person that I am, type A, and most of us go to Dr. Google and you start looking, and the umbrella term under Parkinsonism also came with the primary or other etiologies, and like the multiple system atrophy is included under that. And so I was very worried about that. That is it comes with Parkinson's symptoms, but progresses more quickly. And so I was wondering, I had maybe a month before I went to the motor movement disorder specialist, thinking, is this your kind of basic etiology, idiopathic Parkinson's? Is this something like the multiple system atrophy? Something more that I'm not aware of. So that, I kind of laid in a state of fear with that. And then after being diagnosed by the motor movement disorder specialist with idiopathic Parkinson's that we would expect to follow a slower progression, I honestly had relief because it was going to be perhaps a slower progression. And that's what they said with young onset. We wouldn't expect anything rapid. You may live with the mild symptoms for 15 years, more mild and very manageable. So I hung on to that as well. And of course, I shared with my husband, and we cried and talked about how are we going to tell our two boys who were teenagers at the time. And they knew, obviously they knew I was having all these tests and knew my symptoms. So they're smart kids. They wanted to know, and we were going to always keep them in the loop. The first thing I wanted to know after the motor movement disorder specialist neurologist diagnosed me was, okay, what's next? What can I do? Like, let's face this head on. And he talked about medicine, the gold standard carbidopa levodopa. And I said, what can I do before medicine? I want to know if there's any way I can manage this because I am young and I know at some point I probably will need to go on medicine, but that's a long time. If we're talking 30 years of medication, I would like to see if there's anything else I could do. And he said, well, exercise is one of the lifestyle things that you can change or maintain that has been proven to be neuroprotective to some degree. And I also asked, are the medications neuroprotective before I totally rolled those off right at the beginning? And he said, no, they are not. They are not neuroprotective. They are to address the symptoms and manage them only. So it made sense to me, since I exercise as part of that's like breathing to me, because it helps with the emotional aspects with stress, plus just being physically fit. I was already doing that, so I thought, hey, that's my jam. That's what I do. So I said, great, I am going to just keep exercising. Let's hold off on the medication. And I run. I also started to incorporate more yoga, more Pilates, more weight training in terms of like light weights to also build bone density. And I held off on the medications as long as I could. In terms of family, um, of course, my husband, I told our children a couple days after, just so that I could have time to process a little bit. Um, and then my immediate family, my siblings, and my mother. My father had already passed, and s- as far as work, I was working at the time in the school setting as a speech language pathologist, and I had also recently begun a caregiving role for my mother, and it was a very personally stressful and emotionally stressful, difficult time for me. Had lost my father not too much earlier, um, and I did not feel comfortable sharing with people at work because being young. There, I felt there was a stigma of, will she be able to continue her job at the top of her job like she typically would do? Um, and it just felt too stressful. I had too many things on my plate. I didn't want to let others know. And then uh, I had a family member that passed away unexpectedly, and the stress was exorbitant from that, and my symptoms amped up immensely. My tremors I could no longer hide. My stiffness was worse. Emotionally, I was um, having more difficulties. So I told a small group of people at work and said, look, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at an early age. Stress only exacerbates the symptoms, and I can't hide it anymore. That in and of itself is too stressful. What a relief I found when I told that small group of people. Um, Also, at that same time, I asked the neurologist, what can I do to help with this? Because if I've got this, let me do something with it. And so I very immediately got involved in a clinical research study um, through the neurologist practice. They were not doing the study, they just helped find participants that helped me find a sense of control and purpose with this, because I couldn't control the disease, but I could control how I responded to it. That felt good, and it felt like that was something that I could give back and something I could do to help others and also to help me, because I did have a lot of personal stress going on at the same time. So I kind of could remove myself from all that and just kind of focus on the Parkinson's. Um, and then I eventually, I wanted to go back in the medical setting because that's where my career started. I went to the school setting because I wanted to be on the same schedule with my kids, and then they were growing up, and I wanted to go back to the medical setting, which is my love. I love working with patients, and so I went back into the hospital that I currently working in, and I worked in the start of my career before I had children, and working as an inpatient speech language pathologist in an inpatient rehab hospital, working with patients with neurological etiologies, including folks with Parkinson's. But now I'm back into my seclusion with, I did not want to share this with my job again, um, because of the same fear. I did not want my colleagues, my PT, physical therapists, occupational therapists, the medical providers, nurses, I didn't want them to say, oh gosh, Amy's got Parkinson's. How is this going to impact her? And she's working with people with Parkinson's. And in that setting, we typically see folks who are in their 70s and 80s with it, and not a young female. So I kept it quiet again. And then as my symptoms progressed, I knew I needed to go on medication. And that's when I decided to disclose publicly that I had this. And that's where my real advocacy started. So it's kind of twofold, I guess. When I'm thinking of when I was thinking of disclosing and not disclosing, I started back in the hospital setting. It's been almost 4 years now, and I only recently disclosed in January. So I've been living with this for almost 7 years. From a professional colleague standpoint, I almost felt like I did not want to burden them with the knowledge of Amy has young onset Parkinson's disease. And honestly, I was surprised some of my colleagues had never really known of Parkinson's striking before the age of 50. We just don't see it in the hospital setting. We see the typical after 65. So one, I kind of felt like, am I going to burden my colleagues with it? Like, are they going to feel like they need to treat me differently? Two, are they going to think from a physical and or cognitive standpoint that perhaps maybe I would not be able to work at the top of my abilities, the top of my license, if you will. I just didn't want any doubt. The job is stressful enough. We're in it for the patients, and I just didn't want to burden anyone. What at the second part I think addresses what you're getting at is I'm working with these people who are living the same thing I am. So perhaps if I share or have disclosed it, it might help them. But when I'm working with them, I want to focus solely on them. I don't want to share in the clinical setting. Oh yeah, I have this too, and let me tell you about me. I really, with what I do, I want to focus solely on them. And from a clinical standpoint, that is the right thing for me to do. However, out of the setting, out of work, when I'm working with them, I am an ambassador with the Parkinson's Foundation now, and I've recently finished onboarding as a research advocate with the Parkinson's Foundation. So if I happen to see those people at a foundation event or when I'm volunteering, and they would look at me and say, "Oh my gosh, you have Parkinson's?" That's when I say, "I do, and let me tell you about it." But when I'm working with them professionally, I'm focused solely on them. Yeah. And I have found people, when folks see me, I've not seen any of the patients I've worked with, but when I see people in the community at an event, I've had folks come up and say, "Wow, you don't look like you have Parkinson's. What are you doing? What's your secret?" And those have been the folks that are older when they're diagnosed. I have met a few young onset Parkinson's folks like myself, and it has been so amazing. I also would look at them and think, I didn't know you don't look like you have Parkinson's. So it's a real gift to be able to meet someone else who's about my age and to discuss like, yeah, this is what I'm going through. How about with you? And it is a real community when you can find someone that also has it, because it's not particularly common. Will say though, I cannot dissect in my own mind the fact that I have Parkinson's. So without them knowing, I have the utmost empathy and knowledge based on my experience with Parkinson's when I'm working with them, and I'm fully engaged, as I am with any patient who I'm working with, whether it be stroke, traumatic brain injury, anything that has caused neurological impact as a person living with a progressively degenerative neurological disorder without them knowing. I know what I know. So I know at least what it feels like in my experience and can really relate to them. From a Parkinson's community, in terms of the advocacy, I do feel like I'm a bit of a unicorn because I am a speech language pathologist with I'm a medical speech language pathologist with the background and the knowledge. So this is where, from a community content creator standpoint, where I share my knowledge of how Parkinson's impacts swallowing, where we can develop dysphagia, which is a swallowing disorder, how that can be addressed by a speech language pathologist who is knowledgeable in that area, how Parkinson's will impact your voice and your speech, and how to advocate for yourself when you go to your doctor, what to look for, maybe what interventions would be appropriate for you. So that's where I realized, once I disclosed in January, like, I've got all this knowledge of over 30 years of being a speech pathologist in my brain. It's so a part of who I am, and I can't unknow that. So I know what's coming my way, probably. I know what's down the path. So I am working as hard as I can while I can to use the knowledge I have professionally, to help others, because I know at some point I probably won't be able to work full time and share this knowledge and be an advocate. So I'm coming in heavy while I can. I am so glad you asked that question. I am so glad you asked that question. That one Another thing that I am passionate about is mental health advocacy, and the aspect of being a woman with this disease. All of the things you said, I relate to 100%. One of the things that, when you're a woman and your body experiences different hormonal changes, one thing that was I had no information about, when you are experiencing your monthly cycle and you have Parkinson's exacerbates that. For me, the symptoms, to a point of, you've got 1 to 2 weeks where I was almost, it was debilitating. Conversely, my Parkinson's symptoms increased tenfold. So you had a double whammy, yet I still had to take care of my kids. At the time, I was sandwiched between caregiving for a parent and my kids, working full time, still a wife, wanting to be attractive and whatnot for my husband, still trying to figure out how to exercise. So that piece, I was like, what is happening here? Why every month am I like almost like not functioning? And then, through my own kind of literature review, found that this is a thing that, both the Parkinson's symptoms and your female symptoms exacerbate. The second part is, what I have found is, I've got to exercise. There is, I mean, hands down, full stop, I've got to continue exercising. And a lot of my content focuses around exercise because it's just such a big part of what I do to help keep my symptoms manageable on top of the medication, which I am now on 2 medications. Started to one medication 2 years ago, and the carbidopa levodopa a few 6 months ago, I guess. The exercise is critical for the mental health aspect, um, and you just have got to try and carve out time for yourself. For me, I've ended up having to get up an hour and a half earlier before work just so I can exercise. And when I do that, I find that the pieces are easier to manage in terms of the motor and the non-motor. From a standpoint of being a female and suddenly, or not suddenly, but progressively having tremors, um, that have progressed, it's in my leg and my hand in my arm. And also for me, one of the other things is stiffness and pain has really negatively impacted my life. The dystonia, which with young onset Parkinson's, you tend to have more of, where like you're having a odd curling of your hand or foot. That's not cute. So it doesn't look cute, but it certainly doesn't feel good. So trying to manage the pain has been an issue that is impacts quality of life. But I'm so glad you asked that question, because I do think being a female, on top of having, all the responsibilities that we do, makes it a, a level of challenge that perhaps males don't experience, just because, the hormones are different. The responsibilities are different, I believe. Um, so it takes a lot of work. Yeah, I'm very fortunate. My husband and both of my sons are fantastic human beings. They just really are. And I'm so, so lucky. They, we're in it as a team. So I'm very, very grateful, and I am lucky in that way. And when you said we don't want to ask for help, that is me 100%. And that's another reason why I didn't disclose to anyone, because I just felt like once it's out there, it could be burdensome. But I was 100% wrong. I will say that I've been met with such compassion and love and nurturing, and people at both my work, of course, my family. And what I have been missing out on is the online community that I had no idea was out there. I never, the past 7 years, I mean, it was just January where I started uh, an online profile of myself with Parkinson's. I never did Facebook or any of that stuff until like a year ago, because I was too busy. I was too busy doing all the things we just talked about. I'm like, I don't have time for social media. The only reason I joined social media was from a professional standpoint. I wanted to belong to a group of speech language pathologists. It was part of something I'd already joined, I was paying for. So I thought, I'm paying for it, I might as well go online. And then I just one day typed in young onset Parkinson's. I had no idea there are people that look like me and my age, and it's a community. So I've been going this whole time, just like going, keeping it to myself, and except for my family. And so that has helped me tremendously from an emotional standpoint. Like, sit and I read everybody else's stories and we communicate. I'm like, oh, I'm not the only one with this. So yeah, that's been helpful. I had people and friends of mine say, Amy, 7 years is a long time to go to hold this kind of thing to yourself. Like, thank you for sharing. And I've had friends from, as far back as high school say, thank you for being candid about the emotional aspect of it, the depression and anxiety that comes with it. I've been, I don't have Parkinson's, but I've been struggling with depression and anxiety. What do you do? What has helped you? And someone, another person, oh, I don't have Parkinson's, but I have such and such. And thank you for coming forward with that. And then, of course, within the young onset Parkinson's community, to see other women like myself who are balancing all the things and living life to its fullest. And that's what I want to be able to show folks who have just been diagnosed, that while it is terrifying, because it's predictable in terms of perhaps the long-term outcome, but not predictable maybe for you, because it is such a person-specific disease. My Parkinson's disease will not progress at the same rate or in the same way as someone else's. To know that there's this community of both women and men who are experiencing this, I can't even tell you how much that has meant to me, to know that I'm not in it alone. So I want anyone else to know that has just been diagnosed, that you're going to be okay. I am a very positive person by nature, and very high energy. And I have found that probably one of the biggest gifts that Parkinson's has given me is that I can share that positivity with others and to do it now, because there is in the back of my mind a little clock that ticks that says, you are never promised another day. So do the things that you want to do now. Do it while you can do it. Do it while you're physically able. Engage with others while you are cognitively able. And it's not it's not the end of the world to have this disease. You will still get up and you will still do what you want to do. Um, and and it's not I've never ever ever asked why me. Never. I just why not me? Honestly, like maybe me because I am a positive person and I can do something with this. And you know, you have to make the choice of if this is your path, because this is the disease that you have. You make the choice to then do what you can with it. For me, it's let me advocate for research. Let me exercise and show people that you can exercise, and let me help folks know that there are things you can do to make yourself feel better and continue to live your life with this. Not all days are great. I'm not going to say that. I have some days where I just want to lay in the bed and or where I cry, but that doesn't mean that's how it's always going to be. There's always another day, and you just try and, you know, you do the things that make you happy and care for those around you. So with the Parkinson's Foundation, I am have finished onboarding and training to be a research advocate. So I will be beginning, and I'm actually going to be starting soon, working through the Parkinson's Foundation with researchers who, you know, want to, much like you had talked about, have frontline interface with people who have Parkinson's. So when research is being done, whether it be on medication or technology, caregiving, lifestyle change, whatever is needed within the Parkinson's community, to have people like myself be involved, and whether it be on an advisory patient council, whether it be presenting to groups of people alongside researchers, um, reading material, reading different research, perhaps projects that might be funded by the Parkinson's Foundation, just anything that they need people with Parkinson's involved with, because it is very patient person centered. Um, it's research needs to be driven by what matters to people with Parkinson's, so that it makes a difference. And the Parkinson's Foundation recognizes that I am the expert with Parkinson's because I'm the one that has it. So they want information from the experts, which are those of us with it. And then also, I'm a ambassador, just means I volunteer. I've been through training with them. So when the events are hosted, for example, last month there was an event in our community. I happen to live in an area where there are centers of excellence for Parkinson's through the foundation, such as Duke Hospital, UNC hospitals. The program was managing advances in Parkinson's with technology, as you were discussing, and DBS, deep brain stimulation, just the up and coming things that are going on. So I navigated the table that had all the information from the Parkinson's Foundation and was there to ask or answer questions of other folks with Parkinson's. And they were, you know, everyone's always interested in how did you get diagnosed? What's your journey? What medications are you taking? And that kind of thing. So, yeah. I would just say when you decide to disclose, if you decide to disclose your diagnosis is very personal to you, There is no right or wrong as to when you should disclose to your employer if you're working, your family, or friends. It's very specific to you, but know that when you do, you will be met with love and you have opened up a community for yourself, so you don't have to suffer and navigate alone.